So today let's talk about solving quadratic inequalities. So what we're going to do is, if we take a look at this first one that we have sitting here, what we're looking for is values of x that will make this thing equal, or pardon me, less than 0 in this case. Well, one way that you can do it is actually change the problem just a little bit. And instead of looking for what will make them less than 0, let's actually change it and find out what values will make it equal to 0. Well, if I do that, well, now we can use zero product property, and I can set x minus 4 equal to 0, x plus 7 equal to 0. And so as a result, I know x is equal to 4 and negative 7. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that if I were to plug 4 up into the original problem up here, it would make it equal to 0. Or if I were to plug negative 7 up into here, it would end up making it equal to 0 also. Now, the problem with that is that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for what values will make it less than 0. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to take these values. I'm going to put them on a number line here just for a second. So here's negative 7, and here's 4. Okay, so at 4, it makes it less than 0, and at 7, negative 7 makes it equal to 0. Sorry, 4 makes it equal to 0, so is negative 7. But we don't want that, so I'm going to indicate that with an open circle. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at what about values over here. So we know that these two values won't work for us. But what about values over here? So what about values that are bigger than 4? Like a number like 5. Well, if I were to plug in 5, okay, back up into here, okay, and what I'll do is I'll kind of show it over here. So if I were to plug in 5, so 5 minus 4 times 5 plus 7, okay, well over here that gives me 1, that gives me 12, which is, the answer is 12. Is that less than 0? No. So that means over here, no value over here will make this inequality less than 0. What about numbers in between here? Well, what I can do is I can take a look at these values like 0 and plug that in up into here. So like for instance, I can plug in 0 minus 4, 0 plus 7, okay, less than 0. Well, that's negative 4 times 7, less than 0, that's negative 28. So does that work? Yes. So that means these values here are good. We want to use those. Okay, but then what about values? Let's get rid of some of this work here. So what about values that are over in this region? Well, like negative 10. What if I plugged in negative 10? So let's try that. Negative 10 minus 4, negative 10 plus 7. So that's negative 14 times negative 3. That'll give me a positive value, give me 42. Is that less than 0? No. So that means we're not going to include those values either. So what does that mean out of all this stuff, or all this work that I've done? Well, what I've done then is I've shown, hold on one second here. Let me get rid of this also. Okay, so what I've shown, so we don't want this right here. So what we've shown is that this region right here will be where all the values are that will make this inequality less than 0. So I'm going to say all values of x such that x is greater than negative 7 and less than 4. And there you go. And that's how you do it. So let's try another one. Let's try this one over here, number 2, where things aren't quite as simple to begin with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the problem, and I'm going to factor it together. So I would factor this to be m plus 3, m minus 2 equal to 0. Set an equal to 0. And so I end up with m is negative 3, and m is equal to 2. Well, let's look at that on a number line. Okay, so here's -3, and here's 2. And so what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for values that will make it greater than 0. Well, these two values will make them equal to 0. So we're not going to include those in our solution. So I'm going to put an open circle here and an open circle here. And so now, if you go through, and let's see if we can do some of this in our head, we're going to look at these three regions. Okay, these three regions here. So let's look at some values bigger than 2. You can pick anything you want. You want to pick 100, pick 100. You want to pick 1,000,000, pick 1,000,000. You want to pick 4, pick 4. So if I were to plug in a value, okay, that is over here, then if I plug it in up into, it doesn't matter, you plug it into here or here, your choice. If I plug in a value that's like, let's say 5, okay, and I plug it up into here, okay, you're going to end up getting 5 plus 3, which is 8, and 5 minus 2, which is 3. 8 times 3 is 24. Is 24 bigger than 0? Yeah, it is. So we're going to include that region right there. What about in here? Pick any number you want. Let's say 0. So if I were to plug in 0 up into, this equation right here, I'd get 0 plus 3 and 0 minus 2. So 3 times -2, which is -6. Is that greater than 0? No. So we're not using that. And then let's pick all these values or a value way over here. So like -10. So if I plug in -10 right here, I get -7. If I plug in -10, I get -12. So -7 times -12 is a positive 84. Is that bigger than 0? Sure is. So that means we're going to include that. So we're going to include this region here and this region here. So all values of x such that x is less than -3 or x is greater than 2. Okay, hopefully that's making sense to you. Let's try another one here. Let's try number 3 here. Okay, so what about this one? Well, let's factor it. So if I'm going to factor this one, I think it's going to be 3x, probably -1, and 3x minus 1 equal to 0, because we're trying to find out what they make equal to 0. And so if I set, well, they're the same thing, so just set one of them equal to 0. So x equals 1/3. So on a number line, here's 1/3. Now this time you notice that it's saying less than or equal to. So that means we're actually going to include this value. So I'm going to indicate that with a closed circle to remind me. And then let's pick some values. So let's pick a value over here to the right. So like the number 1. So if I plug in 1 up here, 3 times 1 minus 1, I end up getting 2. And I get the same thing here. I get 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Is that less than or equal to 0? No, it is not. So we don't want that. What about a value over here, like the number 0? Plug in 0 here, you get -1. Here you get -1. So -1 times -1 is 1. Is that less than or equal to 0? Nope, it's not. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is that we only have one value. And in this case, it's just 1/3. Okay, so not terribly difficult. You just got to kind of follow with what the numbers are telling you there. So let's try one more. Okay, so like a lot of things, this is a good one where would be a good idea to kind of try on your own. Hit pause and give it a shot. So what I would do is I would do x squared plus 8x, and I would add my 16 to the other side. And then I would factor. So x plus 4 times x plus 4 equal to 0. Okay, again, we're just changing it to equal so we can find out what values will actually make it equal to 0. Again, we have the same value. So that means x would be -4. So let's take a look at the number line. -4. Now, are we going to include -4? Sure. Because up here it says greater than or equal to 0, and this -4 will make it equal to 0. So I'm going to include it. So I'm going to put a closed circle to remind me of that. So let's pick a value over here, a value to the right of -4. Let's say 0. So if I plug it into here, I get 4 plus 4, which is 8. Is 8 bigger than or equal to 0? Sure is. So we'll include that. What about a value over here? Let's say like -5. So if I plug -5 here, I get -1. Here I get -1. So if I'm looking at -1 times -1, that's +1, which is greater than or equal to 0. So I want to include that also. So what does that mean? That means we're including everything. Okay, so my solution to all this would be all real solutions. Okay, all real solutions. Because no matter what I pick, it's going to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, hope that makes sense. Again, going back to the very beginning of it, the original, is the whole point of this is, since we're just trying to find out how to solve these quadratic inequalities, what you want to do is actually find out what will make them equal to 0. And then if you know what will make them equal to 0, you can then look around those values to find out what will make them greater than or less than equal to 0. Okay, like I said, I hope that makes sense. Hope that helps out.